Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you all for. What's that? Oh, yeah, that's close. It's. Now everyone has a Legion Dart shirt. All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome back. And if you're joining us online, welcome as well to you. The gravest concern I had in starting this series was that I would misrepresent. That I would misrepresent a faith that I'm familiar with, but not in any way intimate or would any way call myself an expert on. So I've been very cautious in using only primary sources, quoting reliable websites and that kind of thing that I knew were genuine, rather than and because that I haven't gone to any Jewish Christian sites, which are often an interpretation of things, rather than trying to keep it primarily from very specific sources that I knew were reliable. So as a consequence of this desire, I got in touch with an old Jewish friend whom I've known since high school days, and we talked on the phone for like an hour and a half, and just kind of, she said, okay, this is what you're doing, this is what you're doing, who's your rep? And she said, well, do you understand this? No, blah, blah, blah. It was a very long conversation, very informative. And as a consequence, she sent me 15 emails in the last 2 days. So I have been reading a great deal. So part of what we do tonight before we get to the holiday is the fruit of that long conversation, because what I realize I've been doing is only representing one facet of Judaism. It's like thinking everybody's a Mennonite. Now, what's the deal with Mennonites? This sounds like ready for a stand-up joke. But Mennonites moved from very liberal. The first same-sex marriage done in Saskatchewan was done at a Mennonite church in Herschel. So they moved, from that spectrum with female pastors all the way over to ultra-conservative.
No radios in the truck.
No radios. Yeah. Bonnets. So to say, well, they're Mennonites means what?
Diddly squat.
Diddly. What kind of Mennonite, right? Well, and then talking to my friend, she says, well, you're a Christian. What does that mean? I said, well, there's, there's this, there's Roman Catholic. Well, okay.
But arguably it shouldn't, right?
No.
Like it shouldn't.
But all the way over to,
Yeah.
which we'll see is somewhat of today. So she said, okay, here's what you need to know. So in light of that, I want to start with explaining a little bit about the 10 branches or the 3 roots of Judaism, and explain where we've been looking at before we jump into a holiday. There are 3 kinds, in the broadest terms, of people who practice Jewish faith. And that is, the first group would be called, oh, we should turn the camera, thanks, ethical, or sorry, not ethical. The first group would be called ethnic, or cultural Jews. That is, they don't practice Judaism. They're just Jewish. My grandmother was Jewish, my grandfather was Jewish, but they're basically secular Jews. So are there Christians like that? Or Mennonites? They're just ethnic Mennonites. They don't go to church, they have no faith, but they're Mennonites. So this ethnic cultural group, they may, wear a Star of David or have some acknowledgments. They might go to a synagogue once a year on Passover. Sound familiar? You're really going to feel like this is like Christianity in here. What's that?
It's like the Catholics.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Born into.
Yeah, exactly. But it's really not a personal relationship. It's a cultural or ethnic. Yeah. And I think a lot of European Christians are that way. I'm Norwegian, I'm Christian. So, and then there are what's called ethical. And this would be Reform Judaism. Ethical Jews are those that believe we follow the ethics of the Torah, the good and the bad, but are extremely liberal. We'll see an illustration of this in the meantime. So in other words, they have female rabbis, they don't wear beards, you wouldn't know a difference when you spot them on the street. They have some tradition, but really it's fairly limited. So when I asked my friend, I said, what holidays do you practice? She goes, I don't know, some. Like it was that, I said, what about the New Year's for trees? She said, what are you talking about? So this is the Reform Judaism, which is all about being good and being loving and being kind. This would be a certain kind of Christianity as well. So where would you put in this camp? They don't really practice it, but they just want to be good and be kind and be loving. Yeah, people who call themselves Christian,
I don't want to say it as well.
I know, exactly. But there would be churches that you go, yeah, exactly. That would fit in this spectrum, right?
Yep.
So then, there are traditional. Tradition, exactly, or Orthodox. And traditional Jews and Orthodox would celebrate all the holidays. They would wear the right clothes. They would be conservative. So when you think about midnights, this would be like your Sommerfelds and your, what's another?
Reinman's not even, but like Alkinia.
Yeah, these very conservative midnights too. The women dress a certain way, the men dress a certain way. You don't do this, you don't do that. What was that group we met in Alberta? They were what? They were in Sommerfeld. But it doesn't matter. So, and then there would be,
Those were Hutterites.
yeah, a little group called the hyper-Orthodox, which we'll see in a minute. And these are, oi, like extremists of Judaism. This is particularly a group from the Bronx, which we'll look at. So we get this spectrum. What we've been getting, most of our sources are from Orthodox Jews. The rules, the rituals, more. Because to actually talk about this, you'll get, well, really, I don't know, you eat pork? I had a friend who was in high school, and his dad called it the kosher zone. So when you got 50 miles away from the synagogue, you could have bacon and eggs. Because when he went camping, he wanted bacon and eggs, So there was the kosher zone, right? So he would have been just ethnically a Jew, or culturally.
He just had the nose.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. By the way, there is some reasonable arguments that Menno Simons was Jewish.
That would make a lot of sense.
Yes, it would.
There's a ton of Judaism in Mennonite culture.
Oh, absolutely.
A ton.
The
way
more
they
we do
prep
this,
before
the
and after the meal, same thing. Like
Yeah.
there's a ton of cultural stuff.
The more we do this, the more you feel it, right? And this is Christendom too, right? Christianity runs the gamut. So when she asked me what I am, I said, well, I'm probably, more over here.
Yep.
I'm not Reformed. I'm certainly not this. I'm kind of more over here. I'm not this. So she said, well, what am I then? I said, well, you're probably United Church.
See, that's what I didn't want to say. But now we got
Probably
it.
over
It's out
here
there. The
somewhere.
barrier.
It's like, what does that mean?
Hey, we've had the F word in church, so I mean, it's. You can say
So.
that was so technical.
Bonnie, could you hop up and get me a glass of water? So let me just walk you through. I want to show you a video called 10 Branches.
Said all the other words. Oh, yeah, around coffee with cheese. That's Christian. He didn't even know what he was saying. I love it.
Judaism is classified as one of the world religions. However, within Judaism, there are many branches or groups that share fundamental beliefs, but they vary in certain aspects. In this episode, I'll be exploring with you 10 branches of Judaism that you may not have even known about. What's happening, guys? Welcome back to FTD Facts. My name is Leroy Kenton, and now I've always found Judaism and Jewish culture just very fascinating. I really love learning new stuff about the culture and the whole religion and everything. I just always want to know stuff, So don't go anywhere, guys. I got tons of info coming up right now. So the branch we're going to start off with at number 10 is Reform Judaism. The largest affiliation of American Jews, about 35% of Jews identify as Reform Jews. This branch focuses a lot of its attention on the importance of the Jewish ethical traditions above the obligations of Jewish law. Reform Judaism has typically aimed to adapt Jewish tradition to modern understandings, and it really prides itself on being progressive in its political sense, as well as it also prioritizes social justice work. This branch emphasizes personal choice when it comes to the ritual observance of Judaism. From there, we move on to number 9, Conservative Judaism. This branch is also known as Masorti, or Traditional Judaism, outside of North America. Conservative Judaism considers Jewish law to be obligatory. But one thing I really got to point out is that abiding by Jewish law in practice really allows for a huge range of observations among conservative Jews. Conservative Jews have historically been pretty much the midway point between Reform Judaism and Orthodox Judaism, which we'll be looking at next, by the way. So within Conservative Judaism, you'll see that they have adopted certain practices like driving to the synagogue but nowhere else on Shabbat, which is the Sabbath day or Saturday, rather than having their adherents walk like other Jewish sects. You'll also see more equality among the genders in prayer, in most conservative synagogues at least, but they will still maintain certain traditional practices like keeping kosher as well as holding traditional beliefs about intermarriage. For the most part, conservative Judaism continues to restrict its rabbis from officiating at interfaith weddings, but the branch has become a bit more liberal in its approach to intermarriage more recently. It's estimated that about 10% of American Jews identify as conservative. The branch number 8 is Orthodox Judaism. Orthodox Jews are distinct due to their adherence to traditional understanding of Jewish law as interpreted by Jewish authorities over the centuries. Some of the staple practices of Orthodox Jews include strict observance to Shabbat, so there is no driving, no working, no turning on electricity. You're not even going to see them turn off electricity. There's also no handling of money in any way on Shabbat. Also, they keep the kosher laws. Now, in number, they are actually the smallest of the 3 main branches of Judaism. 10% of American Jews identify as Orthodox, and Orthodox Jews have larger than average families, and their children are statistically more likely to remain practicing Jews. Just like Judaism in general, Orthodox Judaism can be further subdivided into different smaller branches. Modern Orthodox is up next. Also known as centrist orthodoxy.
Because now he starts subdividing into subdividing. So does that explain a little bit about the 3 categories? You kind of can pick. We would probably be considered conservatives. You know, in the evangelical world, we hold to certain traditions. We don't, so we would probably fit in this kind of category, this little space in here. He didn't talk about ethnic or cultural Judaism at all, because it's not viewed as Judaism, but it's a reality. So we would kind of be this inner sphere here of orthodoxy, of conservative. Great penmanship, Dan. So I want to show you how far the Reform, because this is one of the speakers that my friend mentioned. So I just want to show you a little clip of how far Reform Judaism has gone. If Doug was here, I think he'd walk out. So,
Where's Doug when you need him?
where is Doug when you need him? This is Abby Stein. She's a rabbi.
I just can't do it that our female rabbis don't have beards.
Well, this one you will.
Hi, my name is Abby Stein. I am an author, educator, and activist, and a woman of trans experience. Growing up in the Hasidic community in Brooklyn, my first language was Yiddish. I didn't speak English until I was around 20. The Hasidic community as a whole lives an extremely sheltered life where they try to disengage for as much possible from the outside world. We didn't have access to the internet, as some people do, but formally we didn't. I had never watched TV. I didn't go online until I was 20. We had no access to music and movies and radio and anything pop culture. The Hasidic community has their own form of magazines and newspapers, but any outside newspapers are very much shunned and forbidden. The executive director of Footsteps, which is an organization that helps people who are leaving the Hasidic community, always likes to say that people leaving are like immigrants in their own country.
So you can see the extremes of Reform Judaism, but that's a rabbi. That would be like in a Sommerfeld church having that same thing happen, that kind of person being your pastor. So anyhow, so Reform Judaism is far to the left. So what's that?
Yahtzee is like the other side.
Yes, so that gives you a little sense of that. And then, of course, this Orthodoxy, there's ultra-Orthodox, Haredi, Hasidic Jews, and I just want to give you a little taste of them as well. These are just little samples so you get a feel. And then we'll move into what we want to do tonight.
You don't laugh, you cry. Right?
The Hasidic Jews of Brooklyn, New York are the most religious and closed-off community in America. What is Hasidism to you?
So it's a very vibrant community, second and third generation post-Holocaust.
Arguably one of the most fundamental religions, period, on the planet.
This community is a wonderful community because there's a lot of nice people here.
The whole system of how we relate to God and how we interact with God.
I'm about to walk into an exclusive synagogue here, and I'm pretty nervous. Wow. The stakes are very high for outsiders to be here, but I'm about to cross into this controversial bubble to discover the untold truth, which will leave you speechless.
Can you not record this part?
Okay, it's gonna be a disaster with cameras, but we're gonna try. I never thought I would feel intimidated by my own religion. There's security everywhere now in this neighborhood. Pretty intense streets, very, very religious. Everybody on their flip phones because they don't use internet. 100% of the women over 18 years old are wearing wigs. What are you supposed to think or believe in this moment?
So that's a really good question.
Growing up Jewish, I've always enjoyed connecting with other Jews around the world, like I've done in Ethiopia, Afghanistan, the Philippines, and Yemen. I consider myself very lucky to be part of a religion that has only 15 million members, but has such a profound impact on global society. That being said, I've always been extra curious about the Hasidic Jews of New York because they seem to be different both physically and mentally from the rest of us. The Hasidism movement started just 250 years ago in Ukraine and spread to the United States right after the Holocaust. The way that Hasidic Jews dress themselves and curate their lifestyles will leave you stunned, from their big furry hats and long beards to their lack of using the internet and smartphones. Their strong commitment to family, tradition, and strict Jewish law is remarkable. But let's back up a bit. Not all Jews are...
All right. So I hope that gives you a little taste of the three directions. So we get the Hasidic Jews, and there's even a group that's even more Orthodox than that. But so big hats, every law, every tradition. Then the conservative Jews, which would be kind of the blend, and then the Reform Jews, which would be very left-leaning. So you get a good picture? All right. So what we've been doing as the sources that I've been doing, Aish would be one of the primary sources we're using, and they would be conservative. But Shabbat, a lot of the rules we've been reading, the long prayers, that's all Orthodox Jews. So when I talked to Michelle about Shabbat, they said, "Oh, they'll love you, but you're not a Jew." They'll welcome you. You can come. You can be a part of things. You good, but you're not. So, give you an example that if you were to if you were to convert to Orthodox Judaism, you would have to do the whole 9 yards. You'd have to be circumcised, everything. It takes several years, that kind of thing. But if you were to go to Reform Judaism, what they'll do is they'll just take a needle and one little poke, and drop one drop of blood from that area. So that's your circumcision. So it's close, but it's not complete. So anyhow, that's kind of a good example of how the process works. So, all right, tonight. So Shabbat, a lot of it, and again, I don't want to misrepresent. This is a very hard group to represent because it's like, oh, whatever. This is much easier, just like if you talked about Mennonites versus evangelicals. So when I told her I was an evangelical, she said, "Do you have like a group?" Yeah. Yes, we do. And so, I sent her stuff to the Evangelical Fellowship of Canada. Here's kind of where. All right, which takes us to tonight's holiday, which is actually fairly common. It's not an Orthodox holiday. It's a fairly, and especially this holiday now is much loved by the Reformed side of Judaism. The 10th of Shvat, the New Year's for trees, because it's tied to environmentalism and ethical treatment of the earth. So you can see the appeal for them.
So Dan, this friend of yours, does she actually attend a Jewish?
Oh yeah, she does, but it's a Reform synagogue.
Okay.
Yeah, and they have a female rabbi.
She's a rabbi.
Yeah.
Oh.
So the Reformed,
Oh, not his friend. Okay.
not my friend, no, but their rabbi's a lady. So, but just a personal note, within this conservative community, every household has a picture of the rabbi in it. So I'll be sending out pictures for y'all. So, because you need a picture of the rabbi in your, yeah, in your house, which is very like a Catholic, right? You'll see a picture of the Pope or the bishop in their homes. This would, anyway.
They're not evangelical at all, right? Like, they're not interested in people.
Not in the least bit. This group here? No,
Yeah.
not. And these would be, they would welcome you. What's that?
It's just not a thing.
Not a thing. Why would you convert? Yeah.
I don't try to win anybody for their own group like you did.
Not at all. No. There's no evangelism in their
So I
mindset.
think inherently they would really could care less what you think too. because
Absolutely.
That's just not in them.
Yeah. No,
But do they
Why?
have, like, I mean, because we're very opinionated on the eternal destiny of other people. Do they have that same,
Oh,
or is that
yes.
just simply not a conversation?
We are not in the book of life. There's no question there.
There is no conversation with them.
Yeah, you wouldn't. You're just, if you're not Jewish, you're not in the book of life. You're Gentile. You're outside the circle of community, outside the blessing of God.
And so there's no way in.
You could, yeah. It's a very long, and I read a book about a guy who called The Beautiful Face of the Evil Man, how he became Jewish, and it took, I think it was 2 to 3 or 4 years for him to make the conversion process. So he had to study, memorize the Torah, learn Hebrew, and then he had to, repeat certain phrases. It was a long process. So conversion is very difficult. Yeah.
So do you see there being less and less of the
Oh,
traditional?
well, they have lots and lots of kids.
knowledge?
They have like 10 to 12 kids.
And they're
The odds are in their favor.
Yes, so they are birthing evangelism,
I see.
which would be like Lastadia Lutherans. In Outlook, there's Lastadia Lutherans there. They all have like 10 or 12 kids. Yeah. So this group would welcome you pretty easily. Yeah. You could convert to, because this group is okay with mixed marriages, so you could marry a Jew. Yes, you could, as long as, it gets tricky. But you could, and then you could become Jewish through that relationship. Yeah, or you could convert on your own. But the process is much easier. Not as easy as, go to a Billy Graham rally, bow your head and accept Jesus, kind of easy. There's more work to it than that. Maybe that's
Where do those Hebrew roots people fit in?
Yeah, I think most Hebrew roots would practice a conservative form of Judaism.
Okay.
They want to obey the law. But you don't see the Hebrew roots people with the big furry hats or the long, that. You see a lot of them have beards. So I think Hebrew roots people, they would link into a conservative form of Judaism. They would tie themselves, but I don't think they would tie themselves
Because
to
they
spot.
can't.
Yeah, because you can't, that's right.
Yeah.
The level of commitment to this, as you saw in that clip, right? Michelle was saying women have to wear stockings because you can't show any skin. And they often have a black line on the back of their stocking so that you know it's a stocking, not skin. Because you have to be covered. And they'll wear long sleeves down to their wrists, their heads will be covered, all that will be a part of this tradition. Yeah, where, Michelle says I can wear a skirt to church, but not too short. In here, just like our church, we say, I can wear a skirt, but don't wear too short. That's why I don't wear shorts in the pulpit, just.
That's why you don't wear a skirt?
That's what throws everybody off.
That it would.
What's that?
That it would.
That it would,
Well,
especially in the summer.
yeah, that it would.
So, any other questions? Is that kind of making sense? Is it clear? All right. So we've been really looking at this form of Judaism and not as much as that. But this holiday we're celebrating is across the board because of its ties to the trees. So welcome to Tu B'Shvat, which is the Jewish holiday New Year's for Trees, which is coming up Thursday, February 13th, 2025. So, got your Bible tonight? Could somebody read Deuteronomy 20, 19 and 20?
Sure, Jules.
Deuteronomy 20, 19 and 20.
When you lay siege to a city for a long time, fighting against it and capture it, do not destroy its trees by putting an axe to them, because you can eat their fruit. Do not cut them down. Are the trees people, that you should besiege them? However, you may cut down trees that you know are not fruitful
Are they not people? You don't lay siege to trees. You don't destroy trees.
What did the tree ever do to you?
That's right. Trees have a very high elevated status within Judaism, as we'll see within Scripture. And so the command in Deuteronomy is that when you lay siege, don't cut down the fruit trees. You can cut down the non-bearing fruit. Why? Because you need food. You don't destroy life. You honor life, and you only take life as necessary, not as
So
unnecessary.
the Lorax was Jewish.
The Lorax may well have been, speaking for the trees. Yes, this holiday is considered a minor holiday, but it has become a significant holiday for many because it is a reminder the sages make a comparison between humans and trees. It's also a day to show appreciation for the environment. This is the big green holiday, the environment holiday. It is the new year for trees, and it is customary on that day to eat the 7 species of fruit. That is Deuteronomy 8, 7, and 8. Who's got Deuteronomy chapter 8, verses 7 and 8?
For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land with streams and pools of water, with springs flowing in the valleys and hills, a land with wheat and barley, vines and fig trees, pomegranates, olive oil and honey, a land where bread will not be scarce and you will lack nothing, a land where the rocks are iron and you can dig copper out of the hills.
Good. So what are the fruits mentioned, Joyce? Wheat?
Pomegranates and vines.
Sorry, wheat and barley.
Vines and fig trees, pomegranates, olive oil and honey.
There you go. That's the big 7 species that you should be eating. And then we'll talk about a little more specifically about that. So this is the day we eat fruit and trees. We celebrate the goodness of the earth. Tradition includes a traditional Seder or supper service, and during that service, you eat the specific fruit. I thought I had a video about this. Hang on. There it is. Oh, there's a whole other group of Judaism called Kabbalah, which is the super crazy, the super extreme mystics. Kabbalah is, well, and so the people that are going to talk here, they're Kabbalah.
Tu B'Shvat is the Jewish holiday dedicated to celebrating nature and the environment. Its rituals are a spiritual way to connect to the rhythm of the earth and her seasons. The most popular ritual is a Seder. The 17th century mystics provided the first written version of the Seder, and it's been expanded in recent times to include readings, poetry, and song. It's loosely based on the Passover Seder, with a short Haggadah and 4 glasses of wine that are paired with fruits and nuts. Each of these has symbolic meanings for our lives. Mystics say that when we bite into the Seder's foods, we release intention and divine sparks of energy into the world. These return to the ultimate source, which overflows and brings divine energy back down. Kind of like the spiritual version of the way a tree absorbs carbon dioxide and releases oxygen into the atmosphere. The Seder is meant to elevate the spirit as participants ascend 4 mystical levels corresponding to the blessings of the food eaten. Each of these help renew the flow in the universe and in each of us. Participants study texts paired with the progression of white to red wine or grape juice that follow the flow of the seasons from winter, white, through summer, red. Commonly, you eat fruits that grow in the land of Israel, like pomegranates, figs, dates, and olives. And if you can get a hold of a fruit you haven't sampled yet this year, it's a chance to recite the Shehechianu blessing. Let's bring it back to actual trees. This is the holiday where it's customary to plant new ones. Honi the circle maker famously asked an old man planting a tree, "Will you live long enough to enjoy its fruits?" The man answered, "I found a fruitful world because my ancestors planted trees for me. Likewise, I'm planting trees for my children."
Okay.
Trees are held in such high esteem in Judaism that Shimon Bar Yochai taught, if you are holding a sapling in your hand and someone says, "The Messiah is coming," first, plant the sapling and then go ahead and make your greeting. Trees root the Jewish people in the here and now. Maybe that's why the Torah is called Etz Chaim, the tree of life. The Torah described tithing, setting aside a portion of your harvest for the priests and the poor. Tu B'Shvat established into which tax year the tithe belonged. It also gave farmers a way to track the tree's age. The birthday of each tree matters. because it's customary to wait 3 years before enjoying its fruits. Parenthetically, there's a custom in some Jewish circles to wait 3 years before a child's first haircut. Known as Upsharan, this relates to the waiting period on fruit from a newly planted tree. On Tu B'Shvat, it's fun to sow seeds of parsley and place them on the windowsill so that they'll be ready just in time to provide Passover's karpas. Homegrown parsley. It could be a great time to create a family tree and take some time out to explore your own roots. Try reflecting on how you imagine your family's legacy as in the Honi story. This is also a great time for a green-up project. As the almond trees begin to bloom, Tu B'Shvat invites each of us to plant new seeds for spiritual renewal, cultivation, and growth. I leave you with this small bundle of sage wisdom. Don't judge each day by the harvest you reap, but by the seeds you plant. What seeds will you plant this Tu B'Shvat?
So, needless to say, bimbam.com is not a conservative Orthodox website. You can just see that, the 4 mystical levels, that's fine. But you get the point, that's kind of what we do. So, what we do is, it's a very simple holiday. You eat. So, in contemporary, it's kind of like Arbor Day, a day of environmental awareness. So, there are some rules as far as fruit goes. I want to get to that. There we go. First is that during the first, Leviticus 19:23. Somebody want to read Leviticus 19:23?
When you enter the land and plant any kind of fruit tree, regard its fruit as forbidden. For 3 years you are to consider it forbidden. It must not be eaten.
So, that's it. So, you can't eat from a fruit tree for 3 years. Why?
It's forbidden.
Usually it doesn't produce for the first 3 years.
Yeah, you need to give it a chance to grow and live. This is also tied to the agricultural cycle, which is 7 years of agriculture, and this is the cycle of tithes. So I want to jump off for a moment and talk about Jewish tithing rules. This is from the Old Testament, from the Torah. But the tithing rules are tied to this holiday. They start on this holiday. So this date, and I can't pronounce it well, so I'm not going to bother. The New Year's for Trees is the first, where the date begins for the cycle. So this would be day 1, we'd start 7 years. So when you think of tithing in the Old Testament, what percentage comes to mind?
10.
It's 22. The tithe was 22%. So in your notes, you should have this in front of you here. So this is a 7-year cycle.
Where did we get the 10 from?
Oh, you'll see, Prince. It'll come. Because it's 10, 10, and 2. The agricultural cycle of Israel, this holiday that we're looking at tonight, is a 7-year cycle. So on the first year, so I'm just going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. On years 1, 2, 4, and 5, you give 10% to the Levites, 2% to the priests, and 10% you take to Jerusalem and you celebrate. So you would go to Jerusalem on year 1, year 2, year 4, and year 5. And you would give 10% of your harvest goes to the Levites, 2% the priests get, and 10% you take and you celebrate there at the temple.
So that last 10% is really not a tax, it's more like a binge.
Yeah, it's a binge. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That's a good tax. That's good.
So, someone want to turn to Leviticus chapter 27, verses 30 and 34. And then somebody else, Numbers 18, 20 to 32. It's a long section, but it'll make sense. So, Leviticus 27, 30 to 34.
32, 34?
Sorry, Danny. 30 to 34.
Okay. A tithe of everything from the land, whether green from the soil or fruit from the trees, belongs to the Lord. It is holy to the Lord. If a man redeems any of his tithe, he must have a fifth of the value to it. The entire tithe of the herd and flock, every 10th animal that passes under the shepherd's rod, will be holy to the Lord. He must not pick out the good from the bad or make any substitution. If he does make a substitution, both the animal and its substitute become holy and cannot be redeemed. These are the commands of the Lord given to Moses on Mount Sinai for the Israelites.
So that's this 10% that goes to the Levites. All right, then Numbers 18, 21 through 32. Yes, please, Donald.
To the sons of Levi, behold, I have given all the tithe in Israel for an inheritance, in return for their service which they perform, the service of the tent of meeting. The sons of Israel shall not come near the tent of meeting again, or they will bear sin and die. Only the Levites shall perform the service of the tent of meeting, and they shall bear their iniquity. It shall be a perpetual statute throughout your generations, and among the sons of Israel they shall have no inheritance. For the tithe of the sons of Israel, which they offer as an offering to the Lord, I have given to the Levites for an inheritance. Therefore, I have said concerning them, they shall have no inheritance among the sons of Israel. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Moreover, you shall speak to the Levites and say to them, when you take from the sons of Israel the tithe which I have given you from them for your inheritance, then you shall present an offering from it to the Lord, a tithe of the tithe. Your offering shall be reckoned to you as the grain from the threshing floor, or the full produce from the wine vat. So you shall also present an offering to the Lord from your tithes, which you receive from the sons of Israel. And from it you shall give the Lord's offering to Aaron the priest. Out of all your gifts you shall present every offering due to the Lord, from all the best of them, the sacred part from them. You shall say to them, when you have offered from it the best of it, then the rest shall be reckoned to the Levites as the product of the threshing floor, and as the product of the wine vat. You may eat it anywhere, you and your households, for it is in your compensation in return for your service in the tent of meeting. You will bear no sin by reason of it when you have offered the best of it. But you shall not profane the sacred gifts of the sons of Israel, or you will die.
So this gets a little complicated and extra biblical in a moment. So the way they work this out is these ones. Then the Levites give a tithe on the tithe. So they give 10% of the 10%, and they give it to the priests, the Kohen. So that's another 10. So the priests get 3%. These guys get a 9%. You get 10% to celebrate with. The priests get 3%. So he has to tithe on his tithe.
Taxes on taxes.
Yeah. So he gets, the Levite gets his tithe from you. He in turn then tithes to the priest. So pastor's tithe. I mean, that's not the rule, but that's how this works, right? So that you end up, what you read was, just through tradition, it ends up being this 22%. So we got 22% here, 22% here, sorry, 22% here. All right, then we have other tithes on years 3 and 6. This is called the secondary tithe on year 3 and 6. The second tithe, it's called the Maser Sheni. Sheni just means second and Maser means tithe. Was the second tithe taken from the produce remaining after the priest's tithe and your portion was taken. The second was taken to Jerusalem, where it was eaten by its owner and his family while in a state of ritual purity. So this goes to Deuteronomy 14, 24, and 25. Oh, sorry, that's where I'm missing. Nope, this is I got the wrong date. We've already done that. So year 3 and 6 is different. Year 3 and 6 is the tithe. Oh, let's do Deuteronomy 14, 24, and 25. Somebody got, Bonnie, you got Deuteronomy 14, 24, and 25?
But if that place is too distant, and you have been blessed by the Lord your God, and cannot carry the tithe, because of the place where the Lord will choose to put his name is so far away, then exchange your tithe for silver, and take the silver with you, and go to the place the Lord your God will choose.
Good. So these ones, this is the 10% you take to Jerusalem with you. The 10% you give to the Levites, the 2% you give to the priests, and if it's too far, so a tithe is actually 10% of your grain, 10%, but if it's too far, you're living 100 miles away, you convert that to silver or gold, and then you take that to Jerusalem, and then you buy food there. Okay, so that occurs on years 1, 2, 4, and 5. Make sense so far? You can see how complicated this is? Then we get years 3 and 6, which is now the tithe for the poor. In the 3rd and 6th year of the 7 years, the cycle, the poor were given instead of celebrating. So now you give 10% to the poor. So here, you still give 10% to the Levites, 2% to the priests, but the 10% now you don't spend on yourself, you give that to the poor. So still 22%. And then the poor get 10%. All tithes were to be distributed, eaten, and redeemed in the previous 3 years were then to be dealt with. So, and on and on. I'm not going to go into a lot of more detail after that. So the poor then would get their 10% on the 3rd. So like the food bank, right? You only get it on you don't get it every month. You get it on years 3 and year 6. And on year 7, which is the 7th cycle, you tithe 0%. Sort of, but there's a downside to this. If you read Leviticus 25, 1 through 4, and Exodus 23, 10 and 11. Fritz, do you have your Bible in front of you there?
No, I don't have it.
Could you read Leviticus 25, 1 through 4? And Harlan, could you read Exodus 23, 10 and 11?
Leviticus, what was it?
25, 1 to 4.
The Lord spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai. Speak to the Israelites and tell them, when you enter the land I am giving you, the land will observe a Sabbath to the Lord. You may sow your field for 6 years, and you may prune your vineyard and gather its produce for 6 years. But there will be a Sabbath of complete rest for the land in the 7th year, a Sabbath to the Lord. You are not to sow your field or prune your vineyard.
Good. And then Exodus 23, 10 and 11. Harlan.
Now I am going to send you to Pharaoh, and your man, may he let you lead my people out of Egypt. I am not the person for that job like Moses explained.
Is that Exodus 23, 10, 11?
Yeah.
Okay, I got the wrong verse. So, on the 7th year, you don't pay any taxes. But what else do you not do? You don't work. You have no income. So on the 7th year, you don't plant a crop. You don't harvest. You don't plant anything. You can't pluck the trees. You can't do anything. So on the year 7, no taxes, but no income. Gets a little tricky, doesn't it? So that's the 7-year cycle. So if we started, let's say, in this year, well, let's say we'll start in 2000. So 2000, you do your 22%, then 22%, then the poor, then 22%, then 20%, then the poor, and then in 2007, you take the year off. 2014, you would take another year off. 2021, you take. So within a life of, here's the fun part, you're supposed to live 70, right? 70 years. And that's how many cycles? 10. So you take 10 Sabbaths in your lifetime. So 10 years for your lifetime, you would take a year off every 7th year. How's that sound, guys? Nothing for a year. Just relax and enjoy.
So is the cycle based on your age, or is it is the 7th year the same for everyone?
The 7th year is the same because it starts with Moses. So if you keep the records, year 1 is when Moses gave the law.
So you're obviously saving up for 6 years to afford the 7th year.
That's right. The bounty of the land should be sufficient. You're 78, you're 78%.
Which is a lot.
Yeah. Should be enough to sustain you for the 7th year. And the priests don't get any of that year either, right? Nothing.
But they still have to priest.
But they still have to priest because their 10%, which is 60%, should be enough for their 7th year.
So nobody works on the 7th?
Well, the priests do, but there's no labor.
But there's no shops like that?
Well, no, there's just no farming.
Oh, no farming.
No farming. And it's an agricultural society.
But there's still trading grocery.
Oh, yeah, all that would go on, yeah.
So it starts for everyone at the same time
Yeah, because it starts the year of Moses, right? When Moses gave the law was year 1 of the cycle. So we go back through time, so everybody gets the same, everybody's on the same cycle.
And the poor, they only get on the 3rd and the 6th, I think.
They get 10%, but they're also allowed to glean from the fields every year. They get the tithe at these specific times. But they would also, during the course of the year, alms have to be given. We see with Ruth and Boaz, right, the gleaning on the edge of the field. So there's provision for the poor throughout the entire life cycle. But there's specific moments of abundance for them. So you get 4 out of 7, you give up 2 out of 7, and nobody gets 1 out of 7. Bonnie, you got the book set up for this? So, tithing is not 10%. Tithing's 22% of your gross, of your gross.
Is this still a practice?
In Hasidic, yes, but everybody else, no.
The New York Hasidic Jews, what crop are they farming?
Well, and that's where it gets very tricky. It's like at Passover, what lamb do you slaughter? You know, and that's where that's exactly that's why Reform Judaism is the way it is. And we're going to watch a little clip in a minute. But they say we have to adapt to the times because we're not an agricultural people anymore. We're not rural. You know, we need to get with the times. And so Reform Judaism reformed Judaism to make these things work in the modern era. Asking the very questions you asked. All right. So, when we celebrate this New Year's Day, what do? We bless fruit. And if you look on your page, it says the Tu B'Shat blessing. It's very simple. Instead of pages long, it's super simple. Blessed are you, God, King of the universe, who creates the fruit of the tree. Straightforward. Except for pineapple, which has a different blessing, and you change the last word from Hayitz to Hadama. I have no idea why. Because it's a pineapple. It is customary to eat new fruit you've never tried before, and then there's a different blessing for that. If you plan to eat more than one kind of fruit, you say a blessing over the more important of the 2 fruits. So if you have a grape and a fig, which one's more important? And you pray the blessing over the more important one. And again, this is Hasidic Judaism. So, the way we remember this is wheat, barley, olives, dates, grapes, figs, and pomegranates. That's the 7 fruits. And the little acrostic is, we believe one day God forgives penitence. Wheat, barley, olives, dates, grapes, figs, and pomegranates. So, that's it. So what do we do on this holiday? You eat fruit. Donna, take it away. Good fiber.
Yeah, and then we have eggs and bagels. There's 3 cheese and bagels, 2 are energy on sale.
So, if you could get one person at your table before you eat to recite the blessed, blessed are you, O God, King of the universe, who creates the fruit of the trees. And then dive in, and I want to throw this video up while you're eating.
Blessed are you, God, King of the universe, who creates the fruit of the tree.
Amen.
There's knives. Want to.
I'm not going to lick it and put it back.
No, you have to
Just the pits.
take the,
Because the
Yeah, you don't want to eat the husk.
yeah, you don't want that.
or any of the
You want me to slice that?
Yeah, sure. Really? Yeah. So you just, yeah, you just take all this and then you
All right, while you're eating, this will maybe explain a little bit about what's going on.
In the early 1800s in Germany, most big cities had an all-powerful chief rabbi appointed by the government and charged with making Jewish decisions, even acting as a judge in Jewish matters. If you were Jewish, you were supposed to listen to the guy. In each city, there was just one synagogue and one chief rabbi. This didn't sit well with a bunch of Jews influenced by Enlightenment ideas. They wanted to apply scientific study to Judaism, which was known as the Wissenschaft des Judentums. Their main goal was to promote morality, rather than a religion mostly based on supernatural claims. A reform of Judaism, if you will. And modernizing their traditions, they hoped it would prove they could be treated as equal citizens with equal rights, as talked about in the previous video on emancipation. Some of their first changes were in the prayer book. They took out references to Jerusalem being their true home because they felt at home in Germany and weren't dreaming of returning to Jerusalem. They heard sermons in German rather than drashes in Yiddish. They stopped wearing kippahs, added organ music, and had shorter services. Traditional rabbis rejected all of these changes. But eventually in some cities, an event would occur, causing a shift. For instance, in Berlin, the city's synagogue needed renovations, so for a while Jews gathered in smaller spaces instead. In those smaller groups, these new rulings became popular. In the late 1830s, a young liberal group of rabbis drawn to these reform movements, gathered together by Rabbi Abraham Geiger, began having conferences. It was a small group. These weren't traditional rabbis. In fact, some were so liberal they couldn't get jobs. They started saying what should and shouldn't be done in Judaism. They talked about which rituals they wanted to continue and which didn't have meaning anymore to them. They mostly got rid of the laws that you could put in the category of Judaism is strange because, namely ritual laws whose purposes were not only unclear, they sometimes made it difficult to be a part of German culture. Kosher, for instance, made it impossible for a Jew to eat with a non-Jew. The reformers said the purpose of the religion was to feel holy, to feel spiritual, and to be moral. And a lot of these ritual laws, well, maybe they worked when they were first set up, but they no longer worked that way. And in the 1840s, between the small communities, the conferences, the ideology, it's the start of what we now call a movement. The ideology said that Judaism needs to continue evolving, as humans have always shaped it. They rejected the idea that the Talmud was revelation, oral Torah. It's a human product. Until the Reform movement, there was no such thing as orthodoxy. There was just Judaism. The label orthodoxy emerged as the voice that rejected the Reform movement on behalf of tradition. It said, no, the oral Torah was revealed at Sinai. You can't just reject huge portions of it. You can't deny the authority of the Torah as interpreted by the rabbis, and what you're doing is invalid for that reason. There was a further splinter movement called Neo-Orthodoxy, what we now call Modern Orthodoxy, which allowed some very small concessions. For instance, Samson Raphael Hirsch, a leader of that movement, allowed men to shave their beards. Part of the reason modern orthodoxy was so important was that Hirsch said, listen, we're not going to all agree. We're going to have multiple organizations, multiple synagogues. He insisted that the Jewish community of Frankfurt formally split. So whereas before everyone was unified under one official way of being Jewish, and there were these little, pop-up shops of other ways of being Jewish, Hirsch is the one who said, I'm tired of fighting. You go do your thing, and I'll do my thing. We don't even want to talk to you. Go do something separate. It was a really important transition, and it's a piece of beginning to think about distinct movements in Judaism, rather than everyone arguing about the one way all Jews should be Jewish in the modern world. Another critic of reform, Zachariah Frankel, split from the reformers over whether to pray in German instead of Hebrew. Was it more important for people to understand what they were saying, or for people to pray in the same way their grandparents prayed? He accepted the scientific study of Judaism, but remained committed to tradition. He went on to form what ultimately became conservative Judaism. He formed the Jewish Theological Seminary of Breslau, which inspired the Jewish Theological Seminary of America, which became the heart of the conservative movement as we know it today. By the second half of the 19th century, the liberal Jewish movement in Germany was by far the majority. Around this time, more and more Jews started moving to America, and there, the reform and conservative movements reached new heights. So how did Judaism spread in America? Well, that's a story for another time. Which was known as the Wissenschaft disuse.
So again, bim bam.
Dan, in Israel today, what is it mostly?
That's a good question. We're gonna jump out